Hey, this is Aaron at Power Popaholic, and I am talking to the impresario himself, Mr. David Bash of International Pop Overthrow. How are you doing today, David?
I'm doing well, Aaron. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. I appreciate you being, on the show here. So, tell me a little bit because about, restarting IPO because basically, like all of us, we had a year off because of COVID, and you had a chance to sort of reflect and look back on what you liked with going on with IPO and maybe make changes going forward that you didn't have time to reflect on possibly in the years prior. How has things changed, or have things just you just put the pedal to the metal here and gone forward?
Well, things have changed in the respect that several venues have closed, other venues have changed direction.
Yeah,
So it's a bit of a challenge getting IPO back on the ground, but fortunately, we've been able to meet that challenge, and we've been able to set up IPOs in many cities. As you know, we had one in New York, which you attended last November.
that's
But we
right.
started in Arlington in September, Arlington,
Okay.
Texas. Then we went to New York, Boston, and Hamilton, Ontario. That was all in November. And then this year, we started with Phoenix on April 2nd, and now we're going to Chicago on Thursday for 9 days, and then Liverpool. And we're going to be in, it's looking like we're going to be in almost every city that we normally do. We're not going to do Portland. We're not going to do Stockholm,
Hmm.
but we are going to do San Diego and LA and San Francisco and Vancouver,
Wow.
and hopefully New York, Boston, and Hamilton again. So, yeah.
Great. Great. So tell me, let's concentrate on Chicago. This year, it looks like it's it's a big festival this year. It's 8 days. It's a lot bigger than it was in New York, and
Yeah,
at a place called the Montrose Saloon, which is this a new venue for you?
it is new for us, and I want to thank Eric Cheel and August Forte and everybody at Montrose Saloon for having us. They they took on the whole festival. It's 9 days, 12 shows, and they're doing them all, and we couldn't be more grateful.
Yeah, and you have some real top tier talent for this show as well. I mean, the Figs and the Sunshine Boys, as well as the Bon Mots, great local band there, and a lot of others. Chicago is a really important town as far as power pop goes. I mean, you have the great power pop bands that basically have started and have lived there, like Cheap Trick, Off Broadway, Pez Band, a few others. Um, Tell me a little bit. How did you get these big bands on in the festival?
Well, I have to be honest, a couple of the ones you mentioned were gotten by the venue.
Okay.
But, I get bands the way I always get them by, you know, my wife and I, Rena Bardfield, and I do a lot of exhaustive searching online to find the best possible bands in any city in which we do the festival. Um, and we get a handful of great bands contacting us. So yeah, I mean it's the same process that we've used for many years, and thankfully because of social media,
Yeah.
there are a lot of avenues in which to search bands.
Great. And so another thing that I wanted to find out. So just basically for the uninitiated in IPO, like ourselves, why would people want to attend an IPO?
Because they're crazy? No. Because they like melodic rock and roll. That's always been our ethos, to present melodic rock and roll, power pop, indie rock, psychedelic pop, folk pop, singer songwriter. As long as it's under the rock and roll umbrella and it's got good melodies, then we want it there. And so anyone who likes that kind of music, there are going to be so many bands to discover, and that's really key. I'll have people who didn't know about the festival. They came to see a particular band they knew, and then they would tell me, I stayed for the other bands and they were all great. And I'd never heard of any of them. And that's really the idea, to give these bands a place to play in front of people who will very likely dig what they do.
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit, for the consumer, it's a little bit like what you used to in a record store, flipping through the albums and seeing, okay, I like this, and the record store guy would be like, hey, if you like this band, you'll really like this other one over here, which is,
Yeah,
in the
right.
other rack. And because there are so few record stores now, there are a few artisanal stores, like I like to say, around New York and stuff. But for the most part, it's not as obsequious as it used to be when we were growing up. So attending these concerts and seeing other bands of like minds, I would think, or at least similar in certain ways of ethos, is probably the best way to discover them now, short of going online and just hitting random on your Spotify account. Um, I wanted to ask you also, in relation to that, do you think the genre of power pop has changed over the past, 5, 10 years? Because there was a point where it was at its high, I think at its peak in popularity with the general public in the 90s, and then it kind of like waned and wavered and then gone up and down in popularity, depending on who was hot at the moment. The way it is right now, it seems that a lot of like hip hop and singer songwriter pop artists are basically sort of dominating a lot of the airwaves as opposed to rock and roll. So it's a matter of people like you keeping rock and roll alive as well as the genre of power pop alive. But how do you feel on how it's changed in the past 5 years since COVID, that kind of thing?
Oh, I don't think it's changed at all, other than COVID allowed bands the opportunity to do more recording, because prior to COVID, they'd be playing live, maybe even more than they would have the time to record. And so playing live took away a lot of that time. But because of COVID, obviously, that came to a standstill. And a lot of bands they were home, they used the time to record, especially solo artists.
Yeah.
I think, and I think you can speak to this as well, but I look at my top 100 of the last couple of years, and there's more amazing stuff in it than there had been the past few years, because more people are recording and
Yes.
releasing stuff. And yeah, people are actually still releasing physical product, because I'm one of the few people who does not rank albums that are digital only. And yet, even with that, I was able to come up with really nice lists of stuff. So probably the biggest change in the landscape was that people they had the opportunity uh, to record that they otherwise would not have. So if there are any silver linings in the awful phenomenon that was COVID, that was one of them.
Yeah,
So yeah.
I am noticing like a lot of like I guess a more varied sphere of influences through power pop. It used to be in the olden days. When I say olden days, I'm talking the '90s even. That you weren't considered a power pop artist unless you sounded like these guys, the Beatles. But I think that's changed immensely since the '90s. There are still bands that will do the traditional power pop Beatlesque style as well, but there are so many other influences thrown in there from all genres. And you get people who go retro and people who don't, and people who take the retro and make it their own, which I think is probably the best, purest form of the genre. One of the things that I read in an early interview you did was, oh, they said, who would you like to have at an IPO show up? And you said, oh, I'd love to have a Jellyfish reunion a long time ago. And I'm thinking, has this man ever talked to the Licorice Quartet yet? Have you talked to Roger Manning Jr. and seen if he was possibly into it? Because I asked him once if the team would play, if the Licorice Quartet would ever play anywhere, and they're like, oh yeah, we just got to find, the right place, or a venue that'll have us where we could do it. He
Well,
made
I
it
don't
more of a
think they need to
logistics
find
issue.
a venue. I think there are
Yeah.
plenty of people who would have them. Obviously, COVID is the reason they haven't played. But you did give me an idea. I mean, I am doing IPO LA in July. I haven't spoken with Roger recently because I knew that he wasn't going to be playing, but maybe now they feel like it would be worthwhile. And Roger played IPO LA a few years ago as he did in 2006. So he's certainly not averse to doing the festival. I just don't know if he's ready to play yet, or the other
Right.
band members are ready to play. But if they
Yeah.
are, yeah,
Yeah,
I am
because
going to reach out to Roger. Thank you, Aaron.
well, this is a shout out to Roger. If you're watching, Dave's waiting for you. Part of that is also the fact that they have their third EP coming out very, very soon, or probably by the time this is airing, it'll be out there. And, it'll be a good opportunity for them to play all three. They have a good amount of material now. So that would be great. Go to LA.
Yeah, and apparently in Japan, they'll be releasing a full-length CD of the 3 EPs. Sometime, I don't know, in a few months. So I'm really looking forward to that. But let me go back to your point about
Sure.
power pop changing.
Yes.
The biggest change that I saw, and this would be a matter of debate with people, because as you know as well as anyone, there's no fully accepted definition of power pop.
Correct.
To me, Green Day is power pop. Not everything they did, but once they started getting into the late 90s, I thought every album from then on would qualify. It's not, as you said, it's not Beatle-esque, certainly.
Right.
And it's a lot faster than most power pop ever was. And it's a lot, it has more of a punk influence. But to me, it's got the melodies and it's got the hooks. And of course, Green Day influenced tons and tons of bands. I mean, there probably wouldn't have been a Warped Tour if not for Green Day.
True.
Because there are so many bands doing that stuff. So there were a lot of bands, especially at the turn of the millennium, who were doing Green Day influenced stuff. Not quite as many now as there used to be, because as you mentioned, hip hop has permeated the souls of young people. But back then, it was Green Day. It was Green Day. And we had a lot of bands at that time at IPO that some people might have questioned whether or not they were power pop. It was never a question to me, because they, again, and Billy Joe Armstrong sings very well. I mean, when he wants to, for sure. I mean, sometimes he sings with a little bit more of that punk energy, a little bit more edge than power pop might have, but sometimes he sings very, very melodically. And to me, the best Green Day stuff is a reflection of that. And like I said, there were lots and lots of bands 20 years ago doing that sound. So for me, that was the biggest change in power pop. Again, waning a bit now, but it was palpable back then.
Yeah, I would say the Green Day album Warning was really their first pure power pop album. Prior to that, you got more punk stuff in there. But I love to have this debate with people, because there's a lot of famous bands that had hits out in the past that people are retconning into power pop, or saying, this is the famous, is Kiss power pop,
there's no debate there.
Right, yeah, is that debate there? And I say no, but there are bands out there where you can argue a song or a hit song they made was definitely a power pop song. And I want to pose this to you and ask you this. Is the Judas Priest song Living After Midnight a power pop song?
Not really, because of the way they sing it. One of the reasons the main reason I think Kiss isn't power pop is because Paul Stanley doesn't sing in that way. Paul Stanley sings in a more lascivious, kind of cock rock sort of voice.
Sure.
And I don't remember the Judas Priest lead singer's name.
Rob Halford. Rob Halford. Yeah.
Was it Rob Halford?
Yeah.
The guy who was in Argent for a while.
No, I don't think that's the same one. I'm sorry. The reason I would probably put Living After Midnight as a power pop song is not so much the vocals. You're right. A lot of hard rock vocals don't really work with power pop. However, when I hear the repeating melodic lead guitar, the rhythm, the structure of the song and the catchiness and the hook, that for me puts it in a power pop category. So even if you have somebody who's like droning in a almost like a metal screamo mode. If the rest of the elements are there, I'll give it a pass, and I'll say, okay, that's a power pop song. It's not a power pop band, but it's a power pop song. And you can find this like throughout little places in other, genres, most particularly I think the hard rock genre, like I had mentioned. So, but that's one of those things that I just love to
Oh, no doubt,
debate.
no doubt. If you want to go there, you can find it. But then that opens up a whole can of worms about
Yes,
what is and what isn't power pop. Let's take a song like "Feels Like the First Time" by Foreigner. Now,
right.
clearly, some great hooks in that, some very
Yep.
strong melodies. So why isn't that power pop? And again, I think it mainly goes to the vocals, and they're just not. They're not, and it's hard. It's really hard to. It's hard to a lot to cogently explain what a power pop vocal is, but you know it when you hear it.
Yeah.
And it's not there. Not with that song and a lot of others like it. And to me, at least, the vocals are front and center, and they're extremely central to what power pop is. But again, there's no tried and true definition, and that's why the debate will probably rage on for years and years and years.
Yeah, keeping us very busy in the process, I think.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about getting back to the festival a little bit. Tell me a little bit about Liverpool and the setup for that. I remember it was a very big deal, and I think it still is, that you're in the Cavern Club. What totally blew me away is the fact that, and I don't think many people know this, that the admission is free, isn't it? More or less.
Well, it used to be.
Oh,
They've changed things there, but it's still relatively inexpensive.
really inexpensive, right?
Yeah, considering how many bands you get to see. And well, all right, let me amend that. It is free
Okay.
at the Cavern Pub, which
Right.
is the venue across the street from the Cavern Club, and we use that every day of the festival as well. So it is free there, but the Cavern Club now has full-time admission charge. Well, Liverpool, I mean, there's nothing like IPO Liverpool, and it's almost exclusively because of the Cavern. Bands from all over the world want to play that legendary venue. The
Yeah.
Cavern is known as the most famous club in the world, and for good reason. Almost everybody who's done rock and roll, and not even just rock and roll, but jazz and other genres that used to be very plentiful at the Cavern. Everyone knows about it because
Yeah.
of the Beatles, and
Right.
everybody wants to play there. And even though they know it's not the same Cavern, it's close enough in its appearance and close enough geographically, only about 100 feet away from the original, to where people feel like they're getting that Cavern experience. And it really is. And it's still surreal to me. Every year we go there, just walking down those steps, it's an ineffable feeling, but I know that it's something that I will never forget. And I know that I'll experience every year. Just walking down those hallowed steps and realizing that IPO has become a part of their rich musical history. It's just amazing to me. And I have to thank them for having us back every year. This will be our 18th year. We haven't been there since 2019, of course, but
Right.
we, this 2020 and 2021 wasn't happening, but it is now, and we can't wait.
Wow. Well, that is a great note to finish on, David. I
Well,
appreciate
maybe we should
your
talk
time.
a little bit more about Chicago, since that's. I just want to say,
Sure.
I mean, we'll keep it brief, but Chicago, the Midwest, has long been, the hotbed of power pop and of other melodic rock, and that's one of the reasons we're able to do IPO in Chicago for that many days. There are enough good bands from Chicago and from other areas to where we're able to do it without padding the event with bands that don't really fit or aren't good enough.
Right.
It's a very, very strong lineup, and I recommend that people go to internationalpopoverthrow.com, click on the schedules tab, and then scroll down to since we do so many festivals, it's not a quick thing, but you click on schedules, you scroll down to 2022, you click on that, and then you click on the Chicago link. And we have every band linked to their Facebook page so that you can hear their music. And I just recommend to anybody watching that if you're in the Chicago area, definitely come to IPO Chicago. Everything I've heard about Montrose Saloon is great. Everyone who's been there, when I told bands that I had it, they said this is where IPO should have always been. So I'm thrilled. I'm really, really impressed with the lineup we've put together, and I can't wait.
I think it'll be great, and I would encourage people to go as well if you want to get your fill of power pop and learn about these new bands, along with favorites like the Figs, like the Sunshine Boys, and a whole host of others. I would encourage you to go to IPO, enjoy the show, go to the IPO festivals when they come to your town for sure, and
Yes.
make the effort to go to Liverpool, of course. Go walk on those hallowed steps and soak in that atmosphere and get it all in. Thank you so much, David. I appreciate the interview, and we'll be seeing you at IPO someday.
It's my pleasure, Aaron. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Take care then.
You too.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.